All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh,
Hello. Okay. So, these guys, phones away, notes are out, earbuds are not in your ears.
yeah.
They're put away.
Earbuds.
Copies of notes left if anyone needs them. I got two.
Oh, is this Oh my God, Levi!
My original copy. That's all I got left. I had 45 copies I had available, so I'm not sure where all the rest of them are. I only have 35 students. So, no need to record class, guys, because guess what? I record class already, so it'll be on Moodle for you. You guys can have access to that at any time.
Is it recording right now?
It is. Yeah.
Hey, guys.
So what we're gonna do is every time I video record the class, it's just here's us talking. It's fine. It's audio recording. It's recording my screen right here, and then I put it on Moodle so you guys have access to it if you miss a day. Therefore, you're missing out for 3 or 4 days, and you got all the stuff we're talking about. We're good to go. In regards to this, just a real quick review. We're going to get to the Fourth Amendment today, which is a whole bunch of good stuff on that one, because that's search and seizure. So we're going to quick recap. What is the difference between those two? Let me do this. Let me make it even easier for you guys. Let's go for it. Yeah.
Civil liberties are freedoms you are born with,
Boom.
and civil rights is to protect those liberties.
Correct.
So you don't lose them.
So when we look at these, born with, over here, everyone needs to be protected. So civil rights help protect civil liberties, right? So we're talking 13, 14, 15, 16, 19th Amendment, civil rights movement, suffrage movement, women's right to vote, all of that stuff. Civil liberties, civil rights. When we talked about this one, the First Amendment, right? There was the first thing we talked about was the Establishment Clause. That was that question we talked about on Monday when I went over the quiz with you guys, right? So we have this Establishment Clause right here. And then we talked about the prohibiting the free exercise thereof, right? So we cannot make a law regarding one religion over another in a public school system. Public parks, anything publicly run with taxpayer dollars, you're going to be limited as what you cannot make laws for one. So therefore, what we do, we typically just forget it and don't let any specific religion, right? We just make it neutral. No one's going to have anything there. It's just the easier version of that. Prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Again, you're allowed to practice your religion. That was the big debate during COVID, was this one right here. You can't stop us from going to church. You can't stop us from practicing. That's the very first thing protected. That was what they were talking about. That was the argument I heard during the whole pandemic. Abridging the freedom of speech. So I can't make a law abridging your freedom of speech. Again, in a public situation. Privately, there's some limitations. Again, private companies. This is actually the argument or the discussions being made regarding, in a similar sense, the vaccination. Like, yes, you're right, at the public level, the government can't force us, but that's becoming the debate. And if you guys listened to President Biden last Thursday, he made the comment, the companies, 100 or more companies, 100 employees or more, they're trying, and if you listen to the whole thing, he said they're trying to develop a law, an emergency law for OSHA to basically kind of force those companies to mandate vaccinations. I've already heard 4 or 5 lawsuits that are just waiting for it to be put into play, that they're going to immediately take it to court. Because listen, it's my business. If you guys listen to the other part of the mandate was all executive branch employees. Yes, he has complete under control over every single person that works in the White House. If he says get a vaccination to work here, they have to get a vaccination to work there because he is in charge of that portion, the executive branch. Anything government-wise, if the governor of Ohio were to say all public officials must get mandated, he has that right over public officials. But they can't mandate the private companies. There's actually a new law in Ohio I have to get the number, but it was passed, I want to say about a month ago, a little bit less than, that states the vaccination, if you are owner of a company and you want to mandate a vaccination for your employees, you are allowed to do that. It's your private company. Okay? The government can't force you to do it, but if you want to do it, you're more than welcome to. So that's a new Ohio law regarding the vaccines. But again, they're kind of looking at some of these things in a similar sense. So the freedom of speech one is a big one. Again, if you're hearing about people being censored on Facebook or being censored on Twitter or all those different things, that becomes a big a play that's going on right now too as well. And that's actually connected to that Communications and Decency Act of '96. All right, we got into a couple things regarding religion. Do you guys have freedom of speech in schools? Technically, yes. Do you have complete and utter freedom of speech in schools? There are limitations. And some of you guys in the quiz last week or a week and a half ago now made that comment. It's like, yes, I would love to have that freedom of speech in school, but then a lot of you guys said, but I can understand why there needs to be some sort of limit on a school setting, just because of the process that we need to get through, right? Religion education. This is the Lemon test. We got to this one, correct? Did we get to this?
Yep.
Yeah, we did.
All right.
Yep.
So when we deal with anything religion in a public situation, you can typically hear about the Lemon test. Even if you're listening to like the newscast about religion and politics and public and private, you might hear this pop up regarding the Lemon test. How do we figure out if we can or cannot allow that in a public situation? A couple of examples that we had talked regarding these, regarding freedom of speech. We're talking about college campuses and how they're actually adjusting some of these things with regard to freedom of speech on school campuses. And then we watch this guy regarding being offended. Right? All right. Second Amendment. We got through this one. These two. Round four. Awesome. Beautiful. This is where we start now. Official. All right. So Fourth Amendment. This is where we get into stuff that you honestly need to be really aware of. One is teenagers. You guys already have people watching you. Right? If I were to be driving at 3 o'clock in the morning and a cop pulled up next to me and was driving next to me, 3 in the morning. If a teenager's driving at 3 o'clock in the morning and a cop pulls up next to you, which one are they going to probably be more suspicious of? Teenagers. Right? It's just a statistical thing. There's a trend. There's one of my friends who's a teacher has this statement. It's called he says it's the record rides. And when he first said it years ago, I was like, what do you mean by the record rides? And what he said was, there are stereotypes that we tend to live up to. So let's say that there was an accident out in the parking lot. And in the questioning of the two teenagers, you find out that the boy was going 70 miles an hour down the record rides. You have lived up to the male stereotype of a teenager driving a car at high rates of speed. If at the same time you're talking to the girl that was hit and she says, oh my gosh, I didn't even see him. I was like texting my friend and I was looking in the mirror I was looking up and stereotype, horrible stereotype. However, in that moment, you have fulfilled the stereotype, the record rides, right? So when we look at some of these things we deal with, you guys have a lot of situations you just need to be aware of, right? Going back to the guy thing, driving and accidents, stereotypically, right? One of the reasons why guys' insurances are more expensive. Anybody want to know? Anyone have a guess as to why guys' insurance are? What's that?
They're statistically more likely to be in an accident.
Correct. But what do guys do teenage-wise that girls don't do teenage-wise?
Seatbelts.
It could be part of it, yeah.
Drive recklessly.
Yeah, guys are overt in regards to insurance issues. So if you were to talk to somebody in the insurance industry, for males at the age of 15 and a half to 25, tend to be more active in their driving skills. Like, yeah, I can make my car go fast. You want to see how fast? Or I know that car's going really fast, but I can make it. Or here's a great one that's really happened, and it was it was an older guy, so he doesn't fit in the stereotype, but it was a guy, so he kind of fits that stereotype. It was at church, and this was when I was like 11 or 12, and he was the music director, but he drove a very, very nice Porsche. He worked for the Cleveland Clinic, the Porsche 911 with a big, huge whale tail, and he was convinced he could fit that car into the foyer of the church. So he tried. And got stuck in the middle of the doors. Massive insurance damage, or damage to his car. His wife, the entire time, going back to the female, don't. Stop. What are you doing? You're not going to make it. You're going to have to fix it. It's going to cost money. No, I got it. Yeah, he definitely did.
He got it.
Yeah.
So
To get back to this, in regards to searches and seizures, because this is the big key for this one, the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. So this really, if you think about it, covers a wide swath of things, right? Because if I'm talking about persons, who in here heard of Stop and Frisk? It was a New York City thing that was going on for a while. Okay, so what was happening in New York, and it actually became illegal, you can't do this in New York anymore, is random stop and frisk people. So you walk on the street, and the cops just can come up to you and be like, excuse me, sir, come over here. Can you talk to you? Well, what was I doing? Doesn't matter, get over here. And they can pat you down, and they can search you. Would you guys consider that unreasonable? Yeah, I didn't do anything. Well, what's going on? So that became illegal in New York. So you can't stop and frisk, right? So persons. In my houses, can the police just show up and walk through your house?
No.
There's a whole bunch of things that have to happen before they can do that. If they do just walk into your house, is that unreasonable? Heck yeah. Your papers. Now this is kind of an interesting one because we're talking about papers. Now we're looking at the digital world too, which kind of connects me up here to this one. We're not going to listen to this, but I'll give you a little brief rundown of it. Your documents. Can they just walk through and go to the bank and get your information and look through all your stuff? No, they can, but that's a different story if we want to go down that road. Now, the little caveats, and this is the digital age, this is the issue we're running into now. Going back to the Facebook, Twitter thing, right? I can put anything I want to on Facebook. Do I own it?
No.
Who owns it?
what if you own a share?
Doesn't matter.
But you still own part of it.
Yeah,
What
but
if
you're
you're
not,
the guy who
not
buys
order
like
enough to
every
be able to
piece
do
of
that.
stuff they have?
So what's happening now, same thing with AT&T. When you guys text something, is that text your text? AT&T's text. It's Verizon's text.
Very sure.
It's Boost Mobile's text. It's theirs. They own it. You just happen to be using a platform they're allowing you to use. You pay rent, right? So if a landlord wants to come into your apartment, what do they have to do? Boom, boom, boom. Coming in, because it's their apartment. Sometimes they'll make appointments, but in the renting world of digital age, so what are the police now doing when they're investigating people?
They just talking to them.
They don't even go to you anymore, right? You can't search my phone. That's my phone. Correct. That is your phone unless you're leasing it. Because it's still like my phone I have now. I'm still leasing it from AT&T.
What if you bought it?
Outright, now it's my phone.
But do you still pay for like talk and text though?
That's that. That's not mine though. That's theirs.
So they still can get you.
So,
That's
so nothing is ours.
So what they're doing now, and this is where you're starting to find new court cases coming regularly, is they're going, okay, well we can't search your phone, but we can contact AT&T and get your records.
What if they say no?
Then they would. Actually, this happened a couple years ago. Do you guys remember? There was a shooting. It was in California. It was a husband wife. I can't remember where it was. But they had their cell phones. One was a work phone and one was his personal phone, and they couldn't get access to the phones. And so the government, I think it was the FBI because it was a terrorist situation, tried to get Apple to hack into the phone. And Apple's argument was, we don't have any algorithm or anything on purpose to break into someone's phone because it's their phone. We don't want to break into it, which is kind of like a nice little out for them because then they can't hack into it. The government in that process created their own algorithm to hack the phones.
So-
Right? So now you have that little, is the government allowed to do that?
No. Not unless it's reasonable.
Now we go into reasonable, unreasonable. Now that's the court cases nowadays. Can I not? Is it reasonable? Is it not reasonable? What are my little, because when we get to this one right over here, these are 4 exceptions to the rules. There's a rule, the exclusionary rule, which is what we're talking about here, but there are 4 exceptions. There's all sorts of these fun little things that happen. There is a key that we have to have in regards to our search and seizure situations. Reasonable suspicion, probable cause. Now I'm going to give you guys an example, unless you have one or you have a question.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why is there searches and seizures? Like, what is seizures?
Seizures is if I literally take whatever. So if I'm patting you down,
Yep.
and I feel like some sort of something in your pocket, and I'm patting you down, I can take it. If it's drugs, and I keep it, I hold on to it. I can seize things, right? Especially in a drug situation or a weapon situation. One of the reasons why police will do does anybody know the legal obligation for concealed carry with a weapon when the police officer pulls you over? What can a police officer do? They can take your weapon. If they're nervous, if they're kind of but the big thing that police officers will typically fall back is I was concerned for my safety. So if I'm driving and I have my hands on the 10-2 and the police officer comes up and says, Mr. Rowley pulled you over because you were speeding, and I say, just want to make you aware I'm a concealed carry. I have a concealed carry. It's at my 6 in a safe underneath my seat. The policeman can say, well, I'm going to take that from you. I'm going to have you step out of the car, and I'll take it from you, and I'll give it back to you after we're done. Because I've done nothing wrong other than the speeding thing. But if they're nervous, they can take the gun, and then they have to give it back to you.
What if they're nervous and you're going to grab it from under the seat?
That's why if you're concealed carry, that's the instructions we were always given. Hands at 10-2, make sure the cop tells you exactly you do exactly what they say. So if they say get the gun and slowly just reach down and grab it with your right hand, then you slowly reach down and grab it with your right hand and take it out. If it's safe and you have to press the buttons or do whatever, at that point in time you just have to explain and be very, very accurate in what you're saying. Make sure that there's no second guessing what's going on. So anyways, this, however, reasonable suspicion and probable cause. This is where school and Officer Snyder have 2 different jobs. This is very, very interesting. Does anybody know anyone who's potentially had, it doesn't have to be here, the office bring them in and search them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. In school, for those who are not aware, all we need in school is reasonable suspicion. So one of you guys could come to me and say, this happens all the time, and I don't think sometimes even people realize it. Or, I'll give you guys a real situation that happened a couple years back. I had a class, it was my first grade class, and honestly, it was a good class, we joked around, had lots of fun, and we were just having a small conversation. I was grading some papers, and they were joking about one of their friends. It's like, oh yeah, my friend, he was at the gun show this weekend. He was totally, we were having a great time. We were talking about he had this list of people that he would probably go after first, and I was like, I literally I said, guys, I have to tell someone. You guys, 1, location for conversations. 2, you have now, I'm obligated. So I said, don't move. And I had Mr. Hicks come up and I said, I literally said, I know they're joking. However, I can't not tell you. They're talking about a kid who was joking around about a list. And so at that point, that's all they needed. They had the kid come down to the office. They brought those 3 kids that were joking around down. And sadly, they had to explain it. And the kid was completely joking. There was no legitimacy behind anything but location. Because at school, your safety is one of the main goals, right? So if there's drugs on campus, which we've had a couple times here at school, they'll do the whole, we've had it happen lockdown, and they'll come up and they'll actually have you guys line up outside with your bags. And Officer Snyder isn't involved. He might be there to kind of observe in case something needs to go the next step. But if it's just reasonable suspicion, all right, and they'll probably have a ruler or a stick, and they'll do what they do at the games, and they'll kind of if you go to a football game, sometimes they'll search and they'll just kind of poke through, and then they'll just go to the next one, and then 30 seconds later, everyone comes back into class, and we lock the door and we wait until they clear us out. Same thing with your lockers. I mean, all that stuff. Reasonable suspicion. If you guys were to tell me something in confidence about someone, that's all I need to tell the office to have them talk to you. If Officer Snyder gets involved, though, he has to have probable cause. So let me give you a real situation. Let's say that Officer Snyder pulls into the Minute Mart right up here near Smith Road, and he pulls in. And as he pulls in, he notices this guy running out, getting in his vehicle, and taking off at like high rate of speed, turning left and coming past the career center down this way. Reasonable suspicion, something's wrong. Why is this guy doing this? Snyder could probably just get back in his car and just follow him. He hasn't done anything illegal that he's seen, but reasonably suspicious that something's up. 30 seconds later, a call comes over his radio saying, Minute Mart just contacted us, said a young man aged 25 to 30, black hair, driving a red Ford pickup, just held him up at gunpoint, yada, yada, yada. And in that moment, Officer Schneider goes, oh, the guy that ran out was between 20 and 22, could fit that description, but he was definitely driving a red truck. And he was sprinting out of here, so probable cause? Yes. Probable cause, right? Light him out, pull him over, go from there. Right, so reasonable suspicion, probable cause, those are the big things. So this one always precedes this one for having probable cause. So there's a good story I got to tell you guys that happened, and it's a Medina one. So I heard this years ago, and over the years I've talked to other police officers in Medina, including Snyder, who followed up for me last year, which was great. He actually called the guy that was on this actual pullover situation and got the whole story from him. So about, I want to say 10 years ago, maybe a little more than that, there was one of the sheriffs was driving, I want to say it was Spencer Township. And while he was out there, noticed a car kind of swerving, just like it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, swerving while he was driving. And so, reasonable suspicion. 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, kind of weird, swerving. Well, let me just follow the guy for a little bit and just see what he's doing. So the guy didn't really do anything much more after that, but then he rolled through a stop sign. 3 o'clock in the morning, pull him over. Pulls him over and says, goes up to him, and in the conversation, for those who aren't aware too, there's things that the police are doing when they're talking to you. Has anybody ever been pulled over? It's okay. It's going to happen. If you ever get pulled over, awesome. You're going to know what you're driving. When the policeman comes up, if it's late, they're going to have the light on, and they're going to be looking. Right? Has anybody ever heard of plain sight? If it's in plain sight, oops. So he's talking to the guy, and the questions are typically repeated just to see if the questions or the answers change. So where are you heading tonight? Oh, I'm heading to my friend Joe's house. And then maybe a minute or two later, where were you headed? Oh, I was going over Steve's. Well, you just said Joe a couple minutes ago. Who's Steve? Oh, Steve's at Joe's. Oh, okay. And then maybe 5 minutes later in the conversation, you say, so what were you heading? Oh, I was going to go to the Minute Mart and get myself some drinks, and I was going to go home. Well, wait, you just said you were...
What about Steve and Joe?
Joe, yeah, what about Steve and Joe? Where are they? Are you getting drinks from? So there's always questions. The other thing they're doing is smelling, right? Because they want to see if they can smell any alcohol, see if they can smell any weed. And then the light's always a fun one too. And sometimes it's almost annoying because they like flash it past your eyes on purpose because they want to see if you're dilating or not, or if you respond. Because if you don't respond,
And
what do you want? That did not affect you whatsoever.
what if you like just shine a flashlight in my eye? I will.
So in this situation, pulls over the guy, he's talking to him, and as he's talking to him, the guy's like sweating. Nothing profuse, it's not like dripping sweat, but he's definitely sweating. And the guy's just acting nervous, a little off, something's not quite right. Kind of going off his gut. He starts to look in plain sight, and he sees some plastic bags in the back seat. He's like, okay, it's kind of strange. Looks a little bit harder and sees what looks like potentially blood in the back seat. And he's like, okay. So now he's really concerned. Partly for his safety now, he goes, and the concern of what's going on in the back seat. He says, sir, we need you to step out of the vehicle for a moment. He brings him back and puts him in his cruiser. And then at this point, because of the blood, he starts to search around the car and looks in the car, opens the doors, and he's looking inside, trying to see anything that's just, again, in plain sight. He sees some blood on the carpeting now, where the plastic wasn't covering. So in order to make sure he didn't mess this up, he calls Judge Collier. Has anybody ever met or heard of Judge Collier from Medina County Courts? Calls him at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning at this point in time, has him come out and says, listen, I don't want to mess this up because I don't want to violate this person's Fourth Amendment right, search and seizure. I want to make sure I do this right because there's another thing that you guys need to be aware of called fruit
And vegetables.
of
The loom.
No,
Come on.
poisonous tree. Anybody?
Close.
Yeah, you guys weren't anywhere near that. Anyone ever heard of fruit of the poisonous tree?
Heard through the loom.
Yes, that what it might be.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna assume it has to do with if an item is obtained from a search that's deemed to be illegal, it can't be used in a court proceeding.
The sad thing about this one is it could be actual legit evidence, but if I get it illegally by not following the rules, everything gets thrown out afterwards. Yes, sir. Yeah. Do you have your scanner or your phone? Yeah. So, in order to not have all of this evidence that he's potentially finding in his vehicle thrown out, he decides to call Judge Collier. Judge Collier comes out, sees the blood, and goes, "Yeah, you're good to go. Search away." So, at this point, and there's some Supreme Court cases that allow for this. There's a lot more leeway when it comes to cars than homes. So if I say search the vehicle, I can search pretty much anything, any part of it. And Officer Snyder told me this, and this is actually an interesting one. Sometimes in order to make sure that they give you an accurate description of everything they have, they will search every little piece of your vehicle so that they can write it down. So that in case you get your vehicle later on and go, well, I used to have a stick of gum and now it's gone. Oh, no, there was no stick of gum. We have a list of 500 things we found in your vehicle, and not one of those was a stick of gum. Right, so they kind of overdo it a little bit, which I think is kind of a funny little twist on what they can do. So, open the trunk.
Okay. There.
Okay.
Oh god.
Bags of body parts.
Oh.
Steven
Yeah.
Jones. Drum roll, please.
Like from
That's where Steven Jones went.
No, from a human being.
Oh,
Steven
yay.
Jones.
murderer.
He had killed his wife in Cleveland. He had
Oh.
cut her up in the shower, put her in big, huge, black, hefty bags, and took them to Medina because he figured no one knows anything in Medina. And he started putting them out with people's garbage, hoping that the garbage people would just throw it into the garbage truck and never have a clue. And he would be getting away with it.
Man, really cut up his life.
Yeah. All because he was out at 3 a.m. and swerving just a little bit. And had he not been swerving, potentially.
Well, if he had not been or rollers on through stop signs.
Yeah, that's the other one too. Right. So yeah.
No,
Oh, okay.
I thought
Yeah.
this was gonna be some like he was a butcher and that was a pig's blood
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of thing. That was dark.
Yeah. No, that's what it was. Very dark. Very dark.
But
But again, reasonable suspicion, probable cause, search and seizure. Yes, sir.
What if they didn't have like probable cause to search and they still did and they found something?
So this is a good question because this is going to come up in our Fifth Amendment. The question that we just had was, what if there wasn't probable cause? What if it was just reasonable suspicion? This is where we potentially could have the fruit of the poisonous tree. So if that guy can prove to the courts that I wasn't doing anything wrong and this guy just pulled me over for nothing, then they could potentially say, because there's something called inevitable discovery, but if I wasn't doing anything wrong and you didn't have any proof of this, because there's a recording on the camera of the police officer, you have to show that court, and the court looks at it and goes, no, he didn't do anything wrong. This is where it gets really, really bad. You are free to go.
You can't be trained.
wait,
I can throw everything out that I found.
So
No,
this
there's-
woman
Yeah.
wouldn't have counted and
Double check.
Well, like,
like she
They-
wouldn't
It would be, well, that's a whole other situation.
So, wait, they would have thrown it, did it South Florida
Now, real quick, I'm gonna show you something. I'm gonna come back.
You're right, I forgot about that.
So there's something called inevitable discovery. Sorry, wait, hold on.
Fancy.
Boom,
Fancy.
and boom. This is a. So there's something called inevitable discovery. So what they could say is, yeah, but this woman would be missing. People would start looking for her. We would have come talk with you, and we might have found evidence here that would have led to. It's a very, very long reach to get there, but there have been cases, sadly, that exist in which all the evidence is amiss. Which is actually one of those things too. We talk about the police, and there are, and I'm not going to deny this, there are some police officers out there that are jerks. My brother is one. No, I'm just kidding. He's a police officer, but I know him. He's my brother. He's not a jerk, but he knows people that are kind of jerks. There's some reasons for that, and if you talk with Officer Schneider, he would probably tell you some of the things behind why some of them are kind of cocky. But if they're jerks and they do things incorrectly, and they go to court and they've messed up all the evidence just because they wanted to prove somehow that the guy personally did this, then what happens to all that evidence? It gets thrown away, and or if he lies about something or she lies about something, thrown away, and then no one's going to ever trust that person ever again. So in their career interest, sometimes you got to look at that and go, well, if I do that, then I'm going to kind of screw myself for the rest of my life. Right? So I'm going to go back to what I had up there originally. There. Now, the second part goes over what the warrant has to have. So we look at the warrant, it has to be specific. So, one, I've got to go in front of a judge and swear that all the stuff I'm telling you is legal. Because the judge is basically just saying, okay, you've given me all this evidence. Are you sure you're swearing under oath that this is all accurate? Because I'm about to sign this, and we're about to go down a road that it's not easy to go back from. Yes, I'm giving you my oath, I'm affirming. Boom. Go search. That warrant has to be particularly describing. So here's a scenario. If I say search the house,
Which house?
yeah, right?
House.
So typically they'll give you the address. Like I want to search the house at blah 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 blah, Diana Road, Medina, Brunswick, Ohio, 44212. Is that particular? I'll get you in a second.
Yeah.
Is that particular enough? What are we looking for? Right? Because at that point now it changes what I'm searching. So if I'm searching, let's say that you are the person that's suspected of robbing the store with a rifle, and I say the house, and I start looking for jewelry boxes in your end table that has a small drawer about that big, is that legit? Looking for a rifle? Maybe the ammunition, but where's the rifle? I need the rifle. I need fingerprints. I need all the stuff that goes along with it. All right, so the particulars are one of the big issues. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, like, what if you're suspected of something?
Mm-hmm.
So the cops, they put you in court and they're like, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and you just say no. What do they do?
Well, they don't use you in court. They don't take your oath.
Yeah.
But you're suspected of doing something bad.
They don't take anything you say as
Yeah.
true or false.
Yeah.
They don't let you speak.
Well, what are they going to do?
This is actually where you get the lawyer's jobs, because at that point in time, let's say they bring you in court and you say no, I lie. Well, then at that point, honestly, I would as a lawyer say, well, then I don't want to talk to this witness. You can go.
Well, so do they just let the person go, or
Yeah.
do they?
Yeah.
Okay,
You didn't
so
do anything wrong. You
well,
just
if you did do something wrong and you're suspected, and then you just say no, you
This
just
is
go
now
for it.
here's where you're jumping to the Fifth Amendment, because what can you do with Fifth Amendment?
Plead the fifth.
Plead the Fifth. I am not going to incriminate myself.
You didn't do it.
Plead
You
the
did not
fifth.
do it.
Yeah, and the nice thing about pleading the Fifth is they can't use you pleading the Fifth as you're admitting guilt. All you're basically saying is, I'm not going to talk. Which the police will actually tell you right up front, you have the right to remain silent.
So you get no punishment. So if you murdered somebody and you were suspected and you just said, no, I won't tell the truth and I am using my Fifth Amendment rights, they can't do anything about
Correct.
it.
You
It's
do not have to, if you're on trial, now mind you, all of my investigative team goes after you, and I bring you up on the stand as the attorney that's prosecuting you, and I start asking you questions. Well, first of all, you said, no, I'm not going to answer this. Or what will probably happen is you'll get up on the stand and you'll say, I plead the Fifth. Like, you can say that all day long. And no matter what I say, which I have an example for you when I get there. Because sometimes it's kind of absurd, but sometimes you might slip. So every once in a while, they'll play that game with you guys.
Yeah, what if you just say I played the Fifth the whole time?
You can. You're not.
Well, that's
Well,
not
Is
never
that
done.
over?
But this is the thing. You don't have to. You don't have to talk. I can still prove you're guilty without you talking.
So you need concrete.
Yeah.
For a lawyer.
This makes your job a lot harder.
It's their job.
Yes. Keep in mind, guys, there are some cases. So I'm going to show you this. This is not in your notes, but I'm going to go over them with you anyways. So these are kind of like the 4 major cases regarding search and seizure. There's actually an updated one here regarding the cars, but the first one is actually from Cleveland, Ohio. Valerie Mapp, and they came to her house thinking that she was a friend with a person that was bombing churches in the area. So they thought that there was bomb-making equipment and bomb-making materials in her house. They told her they were going to get a warrant because she wouldn't let them in the first time, and then they showed up, and they basically kind of went up to her and they said, "Here's your warrant," and like did that, and they tried to pull it away from her, so she grabbed it and she stuffed it in her bra, and they arrested her for 1, contacting them, 2, I'm trying to think, it was getting in the way of the investigation, but she had it in her bra. And she was able to prove later on that it was actually a blank piece of paper, or a piece of paper with some random typing. They didn't have a warrant. When they were searching through the house, they found no bomb-making equipment. They did, however, at the time find pornography. And in the 60s, when this happened, that was illegal at the time. So they arrested her for having inappropriate materials, and she had some other things in the house that were illegal at the time. When they got to court, she was like, "Listen, they gave me a warrant," and so the judge said, "I want that warrant," and they didn't have a warrant. And so everything that they found in the house, thrown out. So she was released based off of that. So that's a big one.
Can't they just come back?
I want that warrant.
They can, but it's going to be a lot more difficult.
Was that a warrant?
Yeah.
Well, if they know you have it.
They'd have to come after for a different. In plain view, this is the one I talked about for like if it's out in plain sight, well then you were not smart enough to put it away. Without a warrant, flight can be. This is one of those things too where.
Please excuse the interruption. Will Mr. John List please report to the graphics lab?
So this time, in this one, just because you don't have to have a warrant to arrest somebody, right? So if you're running from me, that's all I need as a cop to arrest you if I can catch you. Right? So you don't have to have
You
a
didn't
warrant
catch me
to
last
arrest
time. You
somebody.
can't get.
And then warrantless search of a container. So the vehicle is different than everything else because what can you do in a vehicle that you can't do in 99.9% of houses?
Drive away.
Move. Right? All right, guys.
Unless they're an RV.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can search the car in an RV.
See ya.
What an RV